with more Barnstable This Morning, just about 10 minutes toward the top of the hour on this Friday morning. And joining me live on the phone, I welcome Natural Resource Officer Amy Croteau. Amy, good morning.
Good morning, Sarah. How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. How are you?
Excellent.
So we are talking about herring today, and it's a certain sign of spring, I think, when we start thinking about the herring and thinking about them coming upstream to spawn. Before we start talking a little bit more about some specific projects, can we talk a little bit about herring themselves? I understand there's two kinds of river herring.
There are. So the herring family itself is comprised of Atlantic herring, menhaden, sardines, American shad, and then river herring, of which there are two types. There are the alewife and the blueback herring.
Great. And what is there just a slight difference between those two, the alewife and the blueback herring?
Yeah, visually, the alewives tend to have a larger eyeball, and for counting purposes, you can't really tell the difference between the two of them, which is why we count them collectively. We don't count them as separate species. To look at them outside of the water, it's relatively easy to tell the difference, but when you're just looking at the tops of them moving about inside of the water, it can be very difficult. So we collectively count them as river herring.
Indeed. And so
typically,
oh no, go ahead.
Typically, the alewives will show up first. They prefer water to be about 52 degrees Fahrenheit before they'll start running. And the bluebacks will usually show up a little bit later when the water's reached around 58 degrees.
Great. So we have several herring runs in town, Amy, and I don't have that picture. I apologize. But tell me a little bit about the herring runs that we have in town and what they all are comprised of.
Sure. So we have a number of herring runs in town. If we start sort of at the bottom of the town, then we have the Santuit River Run, which is actually a shared herring run between the town of Mashpee and the town of Barnstable. We then have the Marston's Mills River Run, which is, most people are familiar with watching the herring run there at the corner of Route 149 and 28 into Mill Pond. We also have the Centerville River Run, and there are actually two runs that stem from the Centerville River. There's one that takes herring up into Long Pond and then into Lake Laquacket, and there is a second, much smaller run that goes from the Centerville River up into Red Lily Pond in Lake Elizabeth. And those are our active runs in town, meaning that we have herring in them annually. There are a few other runs in town, like Mill Pond in West Barnstable, that the herring would come in from Boat Cove Creek in Barnstable Harbor. It's an inactive run at this point. It has been inactive for a number of years, but is currently undergoing rehabilitation by our office and hopeful to someday get it restocked by the state. And we're also looking, historically, Little River in Croteau was a herring run, although it was a herring run that was largely rainfall determined whether or not fish could actually get in. And the entrance to Lovell's Pond has since been filled in by the town, so there would be a large amount of work that would have to be done to ever open up that run again. And there are reports that the Skunknet River has been, in fact, a herring run at one point in time or another. And we did see some herring in Flowing Pond a few years ago, so it is entirely possible, although we haven't had the opportunity to really study it and investigate that yet.
Now, are these herring runs, are they naturally occurring or are they man-made, or is it kind of a combination of both?
Oh, it's definitely a combination of both. So Santuit River, by and large, is a natural run. And the Marston's Mills River, a good portion of it is natural, and then there's about 1,000 or so feet of it, which we know is the flume going into Middle Pond, that is man-made. The Centerville River Run used to be a fishway that was created, so that was never a natural run. The Red Lily Pond run, I believe, outside of the improvements that have been made, was largely a natural run. And then Mill Pond, the same. And same with Little River. Those ones were, very tiny streams that were just sort of always there and good habitat for river herring.
Indeed. So let's talk a little, Amy, about the count. And I know that's something that's done every year. There's some concerns about the number of herring, and they're really such an integral part of the food chain. I mean, I think everything eats them, and they do good things for the water. So tell me a little bit about the count and why it's done.
The counting is done mostly because you want to be able to track how your herring populations are doing. Herring are not only important as a food niche, but they're also called a keystone species, which means they are a a reflection of overall coastal ecosystem health. So it's important to watch those populations and see what they're doing. When a population that's that important is in decline, then you know that your coastal ecosystem is suffering in some way, and trying to figure out what that is so you can fix those problems and then hopefully revive your herring population. It can be a difficult task. The counters are extremely important in helping us get that valuable data. Herring run at all different times of the day, and sometimes people say even at night, and they show up and it sort of all happens at once. And without people there keeping track of how many are going over those fish ladders and into the ponds to spawn, you don't really have an idea, other than seeing a lot of them or not a lot of them, from year to year, how your population is doing. And recently, now that the last 3-year moratorium has ended from Division of Marine Fisheries, the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission has become involved and has taken an active part in the management of river herring. And in order for any runs to open in the future, towns would need to put together a sustainable fishery management plan for each individual one that they would want to open harvest. And without count data, you don't know what sort of threshold you're working with a population, whether or not they can actually sustain harvest or not.
Indeed. So you have a new pilot herring count program happening this year. Tell me a little bit about that pilot program.
I do. So there's already a count program in place for the Marston's Mills River. It's one of our more active runs in town, and Three Bays Preservation has taken over that count program for the past few years and has a very successful count program. The Santuit River, where it goes into Santuit Pond, is actually in the town of Mashpee, and the town of Mashpee had started a count program last year or the year before that for that run, and we're considering starting a secondary count for that run in 2016. But for this year, we thought we would try a pilot program count for the Central River run because there has never been a count program for that run, and so we have absolutely no count data on that run. So we'll be offering a training session for volunteers who might be interested in counting next Saturday, March 21st, at the Marine Environmental Affairs Division office located at 1189 Finney's Lane in Centerville at 1 p.m. It'll be a quick sort of overview. It's not very difficult to explain how to count herring for 10 minutes to people, but I will have Abigail Franklin Archer here, and she's going to give a brief presentation on why it's so important to count river herring and why river herring are important in general. So it should be interesting, and hopefully I'll get a good turnout so we can get some decent data started for this run.
Excellent. And I mean, do you need any qualifications to be a herring counter, or someone who just wants to volunteer and wants to be a part of it?
Yeah, it really can be anybody. I mean, usually for the younger people, transportation can be really the only issue. But if you have 10 minutes, then you have enough time to be a part of this program. You can pick the day or days that you want to participate. You can pick the time slots. The time slots are set up so that you would sign up for an entire hour, but within that hour, you can pick whatever 10 minutes you want to come by and, just count the herring. You take a simple water temperature and an air temperature with the thermometer that we would provide, and then record that information, and it's really that simple.
Excellent. And so that training session, your training session, is on Saturday, March 21st, and I actually ran into Lindsay Council of Three Bays yesterday, and as reiterated that there's a training actually going on tomorrow in Marston's Mills, too.
Yes. So the Three Bays training for people who are interested in participating in their volunteer count for the Marston's Mills River is going to be held at Liberty Hall in Marston's Mills, also at 1 p.m.
Excellent. Well, Amy, I thank you so much, as always, for joining us here on Barnstable This Morning. A pleasure to have you on the program. And we will talk with you again sometime soon. Have a great weekend.
You too.
All right. Bye-bye. Amy Croteau is our Natural Resource Officer here in the town of Barnstable again.